The war had lasted longer than any living species cared to remember. 73 years of fractured alliances, burning colonies, and silent extinction events hidden behind diplomatic reports. Entire civilizations had risen and collapsed in the span of a single campaign. The galaxy had learned one universal truth. Peace was just war waiting for a better angle. So when the High Council of the Orion Assembly announced a final peace summit, most species didn't believe it. But they still came. Because exhaustion is a powerful negotiator. The meeting place was chosen with surgical precision, a colossal neutral station orbiting a dead star. No trade routes, no resources, no strategic value, just emptiness and cold metal. A perfect place to end a war or hide one. Every species agreed to the terms. No weapons on board. No fleet presence within scanning range. No encrypted communication beyond standard diplomatic channels. Absolute trust. Or absolute stupidity. Humanity called it what it was, a gamble designed by someone who expected to win. Still, they accepted the invitation. But not the conditions. The human diplomatic vessel arrived alone, small, clean, unarmed on every visible scan. It looked fragile. That was intentional. Inside, Ambassador Elias Varn stood motionless as the station grew larger in the viewport. His reflection stared back at him, calm eyes, controlled breathing, a face that had learned long ago how not to betray thought. Behind him, systems whispered in silence. Not active weapons. Not yet. Something else. The ship's core architecture carried redundancies that weren't listed in any galactic registry. Layers beneath layers. Systems hidden inside systems. Humanity didn't build ships anymore. They built possibilities. Final scan complete, the ship's AI reported softly. No overt threats detected. Varn didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched the station rotate slowly around the dead star. It was beautiful in a wrong way, too symmetrical, too perfect, like something designed by an intelligence that wanted to be trusted. That's what worries me, he said finally. The AI paused, sir. The absence of threats, Varn said. In a war this old, silence is usually the loudest weapon. He turned away from the viewport. Keep everything dormant, he ordered. No activation unless I say otherwise. The ship obeyed. But beneath obedience, it waited. As the docking clamps engaged, a deep vibration passed through the vessel, metal connecting with alien architecture. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat before judgment. The station's docking corridor opened. Bright lights, smooth walls, no visible security. Too clean. Too welcoming. Varn stepped forward with his diplomatic team. Humans behind him mirrored his calm. No weapons, no armor, just cloth, insignia, and controlled breathing. But no one on that station would have believed how much firepower stood in that silence. As the airlock sealed behind them, the sound cut off completely. Not even ambient hum remained. Just silence. A guided corridor stretched ahead, leading into the heart of the station. As they walked, Varn's eyes scanned everything automatically, vents, panels, reflections. He noticed something immediately. The walls weren't just walls. They were layered, reinforced, alive with faint energy signatures beneath the surface. Defense systems, hidden, waiting. A faint smile crossed his lips, not amusement but confirmation. So it was true. This wasn't a peace summit. It was containment. Ahead, the corridor opened into a massive chamber. Representatives from dozens of species were already there, floating platforms arranged in a perfect circle. Lights shifted gently across alien forms, some massive, some ethereal, some barely visible. And at the center of it all stood the High Council. They turned as humanity entered. Every gaze focused, every sensor aligned. And for the briefest moment, everything paused, not because of respect, but because of calculation. The Council was measuring them, weighing them, testing them, and Varn realized something chilling. They weren't the guests here. They were the final variable in an equation already being solved. The council leader extended a limb-like appendage, voice resonating through translators. Welcome, humanity. At last, all parties are present for peace. Varn held the gaze steady. Behind his eyes, something quietly shifted. Because in that moment, he noticed the pulse, barely perceptible, a wave passing through the chamber, and every other species remained still. Only humans reacted. A half-second delay in neural response. A disruption, a scan, or worse, a trigger. Varn's expression didn't change. But inside, every hidden system aboard the human vessel silently woke up one level deeper. And far beyond the station, in the dark orbit of a dead star, something that had been sleeping for years registered their arrival. The chamber was vast enough to swallow entire cities. A perfect ring of floating platforms circled the central dais where the High Council stood. Light moved across the space in slow, deliberate waves, colors shifting in ways that felt almost soothing. Almost. Ambassador Elias Varn did not trust soothing things. Around him, representatives of dozens of species watched in controlled silence. Some hovered in biosuspension fields. Others stood inside armored gravgrids. A few were simply energy forms projected into physical space. Every species that had survived the war had learned how to look harmless when needed. And that made them all dangerous. At the center, the High Council began the ceremony. We gather, their voice echoed through unified translators, to end the cycle of destruction, to establish permanent peace across all known systems. The words were perfect. Too perfect. Varn's eyes moved slowly across the chamber. His posture remained calm, diplomatic, unreadable, but his attention was razor-focused. Security nodes hidden in the architecture. Energy conduits rerouted through structural supports. Drones disguised as ceremonial lighting fixtures. Every detail confirmed the same conclusion. This was not a peace summit. It was a controlled environment. A sealed space. A containment chamber dressed as diplomacy. Beside him, one of the human aides subtly adjusted their stance. No one else would notice it, but Varn did. A silent signal passed through the team, not communication through devices. Through awareness. Humanity didn't rely on visible systems anymore. The council continued. The war has taught us the cost of division, they said. Today we correct that mistake. A soft ripple moved through the chamber as hundreds of species reacted with relief, or at least the performance of relief. But then it happened. A pulse. No light, no sound, no visible source. Just a sudden pressure that passed through every living system in the chamber like a wave passing through water. For most species, nothing changed. But for humans, it was instant. A fractional pause in neural synchronization. A disruption so precise it could only be artificial. Varn felt it like ice sliding through thought itself. His vision didn't blur. His instincts didn't slow. But something inside him was briefly measured. He didn't move. Neither did the other humans. But behind their eyes, something shifted. Recognition. The council leader smiled faintly. As you can see, they said calmly, the chamber ensures mutual safety. No concealed weapons, no hostile intent, only truth. Truth. Varn almost smiled at that. Because truth didn't require control fields. And this chamber had too many. He let his gaze drift slightly upward. The ceiling was flawless, smooth, glowing, beautiful. But beneath it, he saw it. Thin lines of refractive distortion. Not structural. Not decorative. Systems. Scanning systems. Every human in the chamber was being mapped. Nervous response, hormonal output, micromuscle tension, neural firing patterns. Not for protection. For classification. Varn exhaled slowly. So that was the game. The council wasn't just hosting a treaty. They were building a database. A complete behavioral model of every species present. And humanity, Young, unpredictable, war-hardened humanity was the missing data set. A dangerous unknown they intended to solve. The Council raised its appendage again. Let this moment mark the end of conflict. As the words finished, the second pulse hit. Stronger this time. Subtle enough that no alarms triggered, but precise enough that every human felt it. A biological synchronization wave, designed to isolate them, measure them, and perhaps suppress them. Across the chamber, alien species remained calm. Some even smiled. But humans stood a fraction straighter, not reacting outwardly, but internally locking systems in place. Deep inside the human diplomatic vessel, far beyond the station, dormant architecture began to respond. Not activation. Awakening. Varn's voice remained steady as he spoke quietly without turning his head. Everyone felt that. A soft acknowledgement passed through the human team. No panic. Only confirmation. He finally looked directly at the Council. And for the first time, his expression wasn't neutral. It was understanding. "You've built a beautiful chamber," he said calmly. The Council tilted slightly. "Oh." Varn nodded faintly. "But you made one mistake." A pause stretched through the chamber. The alien representatives shifted subtly. "What mistake?" the Council asked. Varn's eyes darkened slightly. "You assumed we came here to negotiate peace." Silence. Behind him, every human in the chamber became perfectly still. Outside the station, something massive in orbit quietly began to respond. Not loudly, not visibly, just the faintest shift in gravitational balance around a dead star. And deep inside the station's hidden systems, a command structure that had not been touched in years opened its eyes. The silence after Varn's words stretched too long. Not awkward, not diplomatic, something heavier, like the chamber itself was waiting to see which reality would survive the next breath. The High Council did not move, but their stillness changed. It was no longer welcoming. It was assessment turning into certainty. "You misunderstand the purpose of this gathering," the Council leader said softly. "This is not negotiation, it is stabilization." That word landed wrong in every human mind present. Stabilization. Not peace. Not unity. Control. Varn didn't respond immediately. He simply observed the chamber again, but now the illusion had cracked. The floating platforms were not ceremonial. They were containment nodes. The glowing patterns across the walls were not art. They were synchronized field emitters. Even the air itself felt engineered, carefully regulated, carefully measured. A cage pretending to be a cathedral. Behind him, one of the human delegates exhaled slowly. A signal. Not spoken, not transmitted. Acknowledged. Because every human in the chamber had felt it now, the second pulse had left no doubt. It wasn't just scanning them. It was preparing them. For something. The Council raised both arms slowly. "By unanimous agreement of the Orion Assembly and allied governance clusters," they declared, "all attending biological signatures will now be harmonized under Treaty Stabilization Protocol." A phrase so polished it sounded peaceful. Until the chamber changed. The air tightened. The light dimmed by a fraction. And then, the pulse hit. Not like before. This one was deeper. Structured. Layered. It passed through bone, through thought, through instinct itself. For every alien species present, the effect was subtle. Mild disorientation, emotional calming, compliance reinforcement. But for humans, it was different. It tried to map them. Not just physiology. Identity. Decision pathways. Free will. For a fraction of a second, Elias Varn felt something brush against the edges of his mind, like cold fingers searching for a switch. And then, it failed. Not resisted. Not blocked. Failed. Because something inside, every human in the chamber responded instantly. Not panic. Not defense. Countermeasure. Deep beneath skin and nerve, microscopic systems awakened, silent, distributed, untraceable. Not technology in the traditional sense. Not tools. Extensions. The pulse hit them again. And again failed. Across the chamber, alien representatives did not notice the difference. But the council did. A faint shift in their posture. A recalculation. A correction in strategy unfolding in real time. Varn finally spoke. "You designed a very elegant system," he said calmly. "Biological harmonization field, neural synchronization pulse, behavioral flattening protocol." The council's eyes narrowed slightly. "You can identify it," they said, "yet you remain unaffected." Varn tilted his head just slightly. "We don't remain unaffected," he replied. "We adapt faster than your system updates." That was the moment the chamber stopped pretending. The council lowered their arms. And everything changed. The architecture of the station responded instantly. A low-frequency hum rolled through the walls, not audible but felt in the chest. The floating platforms locked into rigid alignment. Invisible seams in the chamber opened like mechanical petals. Defense systems revealed themselves. Not weapons. Control infrastructure. Gravity shifted. Not enough to crush. Enough to test. Across the chamber, alien delegates finally realized something was wrong. Panic rippled through some of them, but too late. Because the third phase had already begun. A sharp waveform erupted through the station. This time, it didn't target biology. It targeted synchronization, communication, coordination, isolation. Every species in the chamber suddenly felt slightly alone, even in a crowd of thousands. Translators lagged, shared perception fractured, cooperative awareness destabilized. A battlefield designed to turn alliances into silence. But humanity had already stopped relying on shared perception. Varn felt the disruption wash over him, and his expression hardened slightly. "So that's it," he said quietly. The council responded without hesitation. "Yes," they said, "human unpredictability exceeds acceptable variance. Stabilization requires correction." Correction. The chamber began to change shape. Walls shifting inward by microscopic increments. Field density increasing. The station was preparing to lock, to contain, to finish. And then, the human diplomatic vessel outside the station responded. Not loudly, not visibly, but somewhere beyond the dead star's orbit, something immense that had been dormant for years adjusted its state. A gravitational anomaly flickered, then stabilized, then inverted. Inside the chamber, every human suddenly felt it at the same time. A synchronization that was not imposed, but returned. Varn closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them, and for the first time since entering the station, he gave a command. Not aloud, not transmitted, simply decided. Now, far outside the station, something answered. And the dead star lit up from within. The moment the dead star flared, the station felt it before anyone could understand it. Not visually, gravitationally. A tremor passed through space itself, subtle at first, like reality had briefly forgotten how to stay still. Inside the chamber, every floating platform wavered. The carefully controlled systems of the station adjusted automatically and failed to fully correct. For the first time since the treaty began, the High Council hesitated. That hesitation cost them control. A low alarm tone finally emerged across the station, too late to matter. Containment variance detected. The announcement cut off mid-sentence, because something inside the station had already stopped obeying. Ambassador Elias Varn didn't move immediately. He simply watched the council as their certainty began to fracture. Their perfectly structured plan, built over years, possibly decades, was encountering something it was never designed for. Humanity refusing to behave predictably inside a controlled environment. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber, Not sound. Force. One of the invisible field layers around the room collapsed under sudden internal pressure. The council reacted instantly. Phase 2 enforcement, they ordered. The station answered. The chamber transformed. Panels along the walls split open like mechanical petals, revealing layered emitter arrays. Gravity increased, not crushing yet, but enough to force submission. The air itself thickened as containment fields tightened around every biological presence. The alien representatives panicked now. True panic. Not diplomatic discomfort, but survival instinct breaking through political restraint. And still, the humans didn't scatter. They stepped forward. That was the difference. A Carthun envoy, massive and armored in natural bioplates, lunged first, driven by instinct, not strategy. Its movement cracked the air with force strong enough to fracture alloy. It never reached Varn. One of the human aides shifted half a step. That was all. The Carthun was stopped midair. Not by impact. Not by energy discharge. By contact. A single human hand caught it and redirected its momentum downward with precise, almost casual control. The floor beneath shattered. The chamber went silent for a fraction of a second. Not because of fear. Because of recalculation. Every species present reevaluated humanity in real time. Varn didn't look at the fallen attacker, he looked at the council. You activated containment systems, he said calmly. That was your second mistake. The council's expression changed for the first time. Not anger. Concern. Because something outside the station had changed again. The dead star's flare intensified. And then, it was no longer dead. Inside its orbit, an artificial structure revealed itself. Not a ship, not a fleet, something larger, layered, built around the star like a silent scaffold of intention. A stellar-scale weapon system. Hidden, waiting. The council's confidence finally cracked. That structure was not registered in galactic records, one of them said slowly. Varn nodded once. No, he replied, it wouldn't be. The chamber shook again. This time harder. Containment fields fluctuated. Gravity grids destabilized for a split second, causing floating platforms to dip and recover unevenly. And in that instability, human systems responded. Not all at once. Not explosively, but like something waking up in sequence. Deep within the human diplomatic vessel, layers of dormant architecture unfolded. Systems that had never been activated in public space began synchronizing across distances that shouldn't have allowed it. Not weapons. Not yet. Infrastructure. Preparation. Adaptation. Inside the chamber, the humans moved differently now. Not faster, not stronger. Aligned. The council noticed it immediately. They are coordinating without external communication, one of them said sharply. Another added, no broadcast signatures, no network interference. A third, quieter voice. They are synchronized internally. That realization changed the tone completely. Because it meant humanity wasn't reacting to the station anymore. They were operating independently of it. Varn finally took a step forward. The council instinctively backed half a step. That single reaction said more than any speech. You built this station to control outcomes, Varn said, to force equilibrium. He glanced briefly at the collapsing containment field lines above. But you forgot something important. A pause. Equilibrium doesn't matter to a species that refuses to stay still. The council attempted one more command. Full lockdown, neural suppression escalation. The station obeyed. For half a second. Then failed. Every system paused. As if waiting. As if listening. And then, the dead star responded. A wave of controlled gravitational inversion swept through its orbit, locking onto the station's position. Inside the chamber, every species felt it. Not heat. Not light. Attention. Something vast had noticed them. The council froze completely now, because they understood what they were seeing. This wasn't a backup plan. This was not a contingency. It was the real system, and humanity had just switched it on. Varn looked at them one last time. "You wanted peace enforced," he said quietly. A pause. "Now you'll see what enforcement actually looks like." And outside the station, the weapon around the dead star finished waking up. The dead star was no longer dead. It pulsed like something remembering it had a purpose. Inside its orbit, the structure revealed itself fully, layer upon impossible layer of engineered mass, arranged in geometric precision that defied natural formation. It wasn't built around the star. It was built with it. The Council's emergency systems screamed across the station now, no longer controlled, no longer diplomatic. Just raw alarm tones echoing through collapsing authority. Unknown megastructure DATSETAD. Gravitational core link confirmed. Station locked as target node. Every translation channel overlapped into panic. But Elias Varn didn't react like someone surprised. He reacted like someone confirming a long calculation. The High Council turned toward him. For the first time, their voices lost their controlled unity. "You brought a stellar weapon into a peace summit?" one demanded. Varn didn't answer immediately. He simply watched the dead star intensify its pulse again. Then said calmly, "No." A pause. "We brought a conversation ender." The station shook violently. Containment fields tried to stabilize, but they were no longer the dominant system. Every layer of control the Council had built was being overwritten in real time, not hacked, not breached, but redefined. The structure around the star was sinking with the station. And the station was losing. Inside the chamber, alien species began to retreat into defensive formations. Some attempted emergency extraction. Others tried to activate hidden escape protocols. Nothing responded correctly, because everything was already being reclassified. A Carthun envoy attempted to force a breach through the wall field, only to stop mid-motion as its own armor systems shut down, not destroyed. Disabled. It looked down at its own limbs, as if betrayed by physics itself. "That's not possible," it growled. One of the human delegates finally spoke, quietly. "It is if you wrote the system." The Council reacted instantly. "You are overriding station governance protocols," they said sharply. "This is an act of total escalation." Varn tilted his head slightly. "No," he corrected. "This is you discovering your governance was never universal." The dead star flared again. This time, the station's artificial gravity didn't just wobble. It inverted for a fraction of a second, enough to make every species inside feel weightlessness and vulnerability. Outside, the megastructure began transmitting. Not a broadcast, a command. The station systems responded involuntarily. Defense grids reoriented. Energy conduits rerouted. Containment fields restructured. The entire station was being converted from facility into component. The Council finally understood. "This station is part of it," one whispered. Varn nodded once. "It always was." A silence fell so heavy it felt physical. Because the implication was worse than war. The peace summit had never been neutral. It had been designed. The Council had invited everyone into a machine they didn't understand. And humanity had just turned it on. One of the Council members stepped back. "This violates every treaty clause, every system of interstellar governance." Varn interrupted softly. "There is no governance without enforcement." The station shook again. More violently now. Structural layers began to shift, not collapsing but realigning. The chamber walls expanded and contracted in slow mechanical pulses, as if the entire station was breathing for the first time. And then, the first human fleet appeared on long-range internal sensors. Not outside. Inside detection range. Already in position. Hundreds of ships materialized across tactical projections like ghosts, solidifying into inevitability. No warning. No transition signature. Just presence. The council froze. How one of them began. Varn answered before they finished. You assumed stealth meant hiding. A faint pause. We use it to already be where decisions happen. The dead star's structure completed another alignment cycle. A gravitational vector locked directly onto the station's core. The system paused. Not malfunctioning. Waiting. For authorization. The council looked at Varn again, but now the question had changed. Not what are you doing, but what are you about to allow? For the first time, Varn didn't look at them like an observer. He looked at them like a judge reaching a verdict. You built a trap, he said quietly. A pause. We just ensured you couldn't leave it. The station's lights dimmed. Every system aligned. The megastructure around the dead star stabilized into final configuration. And then, a single command line became active across every human system in range. Awaiting input. The council realized it too late. This wasn't activation. This was authorization. And Elias Varn was the one holding the key. The chamber was no longer a place. It was a pressure point between decisions. Every system in the station had converged into a single state of tension, like reality itself holding its breath, waiting for one command to decide what the next era would look like. The High Council stood frozen, their earlier confidence reduced to careful silence, not defeated yet, not destroyed, but no longer in control of the narrative they had built. Outside the chamber, human fleets remained perfectly still in formation across internal tactical feeds. No aggression, no movement, just presence. And beyond everything, the dead star waited. Elias Varn stood at the center of it all, unmoving. The authorization signal hovered in every system interface across human networks, silent, persistent, absolute. One decision away from final activation. The council finally spoke again, but their tone had shifted. You intend to destroy the station, one of them said carefully, and with it every delegation present. Varn didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the chamber. At the alien species. At the fear they were trying not to show. At the systems they didn't realize had already stopped belonging to them. No, he said finally. That single word disrupted the tension more than any weapon could. The council hesitated. No, they repeated. Varn shook his head slightly. If we wanted destruction, he said, you would not have had time to speak after the first pulse. A pause. The station hummed quietly around them, no longer stable but listening. Varn stepped forward. This system, he continued, was built to identify instability, to isolate it, to remove it. His gaze lifted slightly. You defined instability as unpredictability. Another pause. But you forgot something. The council stiffened slightly. And what is that? They asked. Varn's expression hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. That humans don't remove unpredictability. A quiet breath. We become it. A ripple moved through the chamber. Not physical. Cognitive. Every species present felt the meaning even if they didn't fully understand it. The dead star flared again in response, as if acknowledging the statement. The station's internal systems tightened. The authorization signal grew brighter. Waiting. Still waiting. The council's voice dropped lower. If you do not activate your weapon, they said, then what is the purpose of bringing it here? Varn turned slightly toward them. For the first time, there was something almost tired in his expression. Proof, he said simply. A pause. The council frowned. Proof of what? Varn looked directly at them now. That you would activate yours first. Silence hit the chamber like a physical weight. Because in that moment, the logic became unavoidable. The entire system, the treaty, the station, the containment protocols, the pulses, the suppression waves, was not built for peace. It was built for reaction, a trigger designed to justify escalation. And humanity had walked into it fully aware. The Council finally understood the depth of the inversion. This was never a negotiation, one whispered. Varn nodded once. No. A pause. It was an audit. The station shuddered again. Somewhere deep within its structure, layers of authority were being stripped away. Not by force, by validation failure. Every assumption the Council had built into the station was being invalidated by human resilience to it. The dead star system responded again. A gravitational tether extended toward the station. Not pulling yet, just aligning, like a blade being positioned before a final cut. The Council's voice sharpened. If this is an audit, they said, then what are your findings? Varn held their gaze for a long moment, then answered quietly, that you were never capable of holding peace without enforcement. A pause, and enforcement without oversight becomes control. The chamber went still. Even the alien delegates seemed to understand the weight of it now. Varn continued, so we removed your control. The authorization signal across human systems pulsed once, waiting for final confirmation. The Council's voice cracked slightly. You are standing at the threshold of total extinction-level activation, they said, and you call this restraint. Varn didn't look away. Yes, he said. A pause. Because restraint is not what we do before violence. Another pause. It is what we choose instead of it. The station's lights dimmed further. The dead star stabilized into perfect alignment. The system waited. The Council realized something horrifying. The weapon was not deciding. The humans were. And humanity was still not firing. Varn turned slightly toward the chamber one last time. You wanted to see what humanity brings to a peace treaty, he said. A quiet breath. We brought the ability to end it. A pause, but not the need. The authorization signal slowly dimmed, not canceled, not erased. Just held, controlled. Outside, the human fleets remained silent. Inside, the station remained intact. And for the first time since the war began, everyone understood the same terrifying truth. Humanity didn't need to destroy the galaxy to win. They only needed to prove they could. And that proof had already been accepted. The station no longer felt like a structure. It felt like a decision suspended in space. Every corridor, every field emitter, every silent system now existed in a strange state of uncertainty, neither fully controlled by the High Council nor fully claimed by humanity. It was as if the entire station had been caught mid-thought, waiting for the mind that would decide its next action. And that mind, unwillingly, had become the entire chamber. The High Council was no longer issuing commands. They were observing, recalculating. For the first time in their existence, they were not the authors of the system they stood inside. Ilias Varn remained still at the center of the chamber, but the atmosphere around him had changed. Not because he had moved or spoken or acted, but because everyone now understood he didn't need to. One decision from him could reshape the orbit of a dead star. And everyone in the room knew it. A council member finally broke the silence. This was planned, they said slowly, not accusation, realization. The treaty, the station, the convergence of all factions, this was coordinated. Varn didn't deny it. He simply said yes. That single confirmation caused a ripple through the chamber, far heavier than any weapon discharge. Another council voice rose, sharper now. For how long? Varn's gaze didn't shift. A long time. Silence. The weight of that answer spread through every species present, because it reframed everything they thought they knew about the war, the negotiations, even their own decisions to attend. One alien envoy spoke, voice trembling slightly with the strain of understanding. You let the war continue just to build this. Varn finally turned his head slightly. No, he corrected. A pause. We studied the war. The council narrowed their focus. Studied, one repeated. Varn nodded once. Every ceasefire, every betrayal, every alliance fracture, every peace summit that turned into an ambush. His expression remained calm, but something deeper sharpened behind it. You weren't the first to propose peace. A pause. You were just the first to make it systematic. The chamber went still again. Because that was the true revelation. Not that humanity had built a weapon, but that humanity had built understanding. And from understanding, prediction. The council's leader spoke more carefully now, as if choosing each word could alter survival probability. So this station, this treaty, all of it was designed to expose us. Varn shook his head slightly. No. A pause. To test you. That answer landed differently. He continued, we already knew what war looks like. We needed to know what peace from your side actually meant. The chamber dimmed slightly as the station recalibrated its systems again. Somewhere deep within, the dead star's structure pulsed in slow, patient rhythm, like something no longer impatient for resolution. The council's confidence was gone now, but something else replaced it. Understanding, mixed with fear of understanding too late. And what did you find? One of them asked quietly. Varn looked at them for a long moment before answering. That you don't trust peace unless it is enforced. A pause. And you don't enforce it unless you are afraid of losing control. Silence. A painful, undeniable silence. Because no one could argue it. Not honestly. The council member's voice lowered, and humanity. Varn exhaled slowly. We don't trust peace either. A pause. That's why we prepared for betrayal before we agreed to attend. The station hummed again. Not aggressively now. More like acknowledgement. The council finally understood the inversion. They had thought they were inviting humanity into a controlled environment. But humanity had entered a known environment with full anticipation of manipulation, and built counterstructures around that expectation. The result was not confrontation. It was containment of intent. A different kind of war entirely. The council's leader spoke again, quieter this time. If you already understood the trap, why not avoid it? Varn's eyes finally hardened slightly. Because avoidance doesn't end patterns. A pause. It only delays them. He gestured faintly toward the chamber. So we ended the pattern instead. The station shifted again, subtly, as if reacting to the philosophical weight of the statement. The dead star system stabilized into a steady, low resonance. No longer escalating. Just present. Watching. Waiting. One council member stepped forward cautiously. So what happens now? They asked. Varn looked at them. For the first time, his answer carried no threat. Only certainty. Now, he said, you learn what peace looks like when no one is capable of forcing it. A pause. And when everyone knows what happens if they try. The authorization signal across human systems faded further, not gone, but no longer dominant. Held in restraint. The council realized something chilling. The weapon wasn't gone. It was patient. And patience in human terms meant choice. Outside the station, fleets remained locked in perfect formation. Inside, no one was dying. No one was firing. But everything had changed. Because the galaxy had just been shown a truth it could never unsee. Humanity didn't arrive at peace talks to agree. They arrived to ensure that peace, once chosen, could not be taken away. And somewhere deep in the dead star's orbit, the system quietly recorded its final observation. Species human. Response controlled inevitability. Threat level stable only while restrained. And for the first time in the chamber, everyone understood exactly what that meant. The chamber did not celebrate peace. It did not erupt into victory or collapse into war. Instead, it settled into something far more unsettling. Silence with awareness. Every species present understood the same truth now, even if they couldn't fully accept it. The war had not ended with diplomacy. It had ended with capability being revealed on both sides of the table, and only one side still holding all the cards. Elias Varn stood at the center of it, unmoving. The High Council no longer issued commands. Their authority had not been destroyed. It had simply been rendered irrelevant. Every system they tried to access responded with hesitation, as if the station itself was no longer certain who it served. Outside the chamber, human fleets remained in formation. Perfect, silent, absolute. Not advancing. Not retreating. Just existing in a state that made every observer uncomfortable. Because everyone now knew those ships weren't waiting for orders. They were waiting for permission that didn't need to come from anyone else. A council member finally spoke, voice strained. So this is it, a galaxy held hostage by restraint. Varn turned his head slightly. No, he replied. A pause. A galaxy held accountable by consequences. The chamber tightened around that statement, because it reframed everything again. Hostage implied helplessness. Accountability implied choice. And choice meant responsibility. Another alien envoy stepped forward cautiously, no longer aggressive but shaken. If your weapon system remains active, then peace is not real. It is enforced. Varn nodded once. Yes. A pause. Then added, just like every peace you have ever known. Silence followed immediately, because no one could deny it. Every treaty in galactic history had been backed by threat, fear, or imbalance of power. Humanity had simply made that structure visible instead of pretending it didn't exist. The dead star outside pulsed again, slow, steady, no longer aggressive. The megastructure around it was fully stabilized now, locked into a dormant observational state. Watching, recording, learning. The council leader spoke again, but softer this time. What do you want from us? That question changed the tone of everything. Not accusation. Not resistance. Understanding seeking direction. Varn didn't answer immediately. For the first time, he looked tired, not weak, but burdened by the weight of knowing too much about how fragile peace really was. Finally, he spoke. We don't want obedience. A pause. We don't want submission. Another pause. We want the galaxy to stop confusing survival with victory. That line landed differently than anything before it, because it exposed the emotional truth behind the war itself. No one had been fighting for peace. They had been fighting to not lose. The chamber dimmed slightly as systems stabilized further. One of the council members asked quietly, "And if someone tries again?" Varn's gaze sharpened, but only slightly. Then they will learn why we built this system. A pause. But they will also learn why we didn't fire it today. That contradiction hung in the air like a warning and a promise at the same time. Outside the station, human fleets began subtle repositioning, not withdrawal, not escalation. Adjustment, like a system returning to standby after full diagnostics. Inside, alien species began to slowly realize something strange. No one was being punished. No one was being erased. But everyone was being observed. And remembered. Varn stepped toward the exit of the chamber. The council tensed instinctively. But he didn't stop. He paused at the threshold and looked back one final time. You built peace on trust, he said quietly. A pause. We built it on verification. Another pause. Only one of those survives contact with war. He turned away. And this time no one stopped him. As the human delegation exited, the station did not lock down. It did not activate defenses. It simply allowed them to leave. Like it understood the outcome had already been decided. Inside the chamber, silence remained. But it was no longer empty silence. It was informed silence. Across the galaxy, signals began to spread, fragmented at first, then clearer. Reports, observations, classified data leaks that could no longer be contained. Humanity had not destroyed the treaty. They had redefined what a treaty meant. Not agreement. Not trust. but the shared understanding that escalation was no longer something any side could survive unnoticed. And deep within the dead star's structure, the final system log updated one last time. Event outcome, no activation. Result, controlled equilibrium established. Status, peace, conditional on awareness of consequence. The human fleet finally began to disperse. Slowly, not as victors, not as conquerors, but as a species that had just ensured something far more dangerous than war had been exposed. A galaxy that now knew exactly what everyone was capable of. And in that knowledge, true innocence was gone forever.